So last night, I was actually taking a look, and I've realized that my animals are eating a significantly less feed. Oh, I fed them last night, and usually when I feed them, they'll eat about half of it. But when I fed them last night, and I sat there and I watched them for about an hour, they didn't hardly eat anything. I mean, they hardly ate anything. Usually, even at the night, when I give them their feed, they'll usually eat about half of it. And I was taking a look at them. I watched them for about an hour last night, and they hardly touched the feed. And so I'm not exactly sure what's going on. But they're not. They're hardly eating any grain at all. Maybe they're eating. Maybe they're eating about a bucket and a half a day. That's it. And but I don't have any animals having real hard manure or anything like that. I'm not having any animals with massive amounts of diarrhea or anything like that either. And so maybe they're just eating the grass. Who knows? I really want them to eat some grain, because the thing about the animals eating grain is that the whole thing about, I talk about grain all the time. When I got a grass like this, if I supplement them with a total mixed ration, let's say I give them a total mixed ration, right? When I give them a total mixed ration and I got a grass like this, if they eat about 1% of their body weight, then I can almost be guaranteed that the animals are going to put on about a pound from eating that grain. And let's say, and I've been talking about the whole thing about my business, and I've already even told you that the animals here, they're, the average weight on these animals, I got 3 real big ones, right? I got 3 real big ones, and then, the average weight on my animals here, if you include the 3 big ones, is probably about 500 pounds, 550 pounds. And I have 20 animals here, right? And so if you think about it, if I got, if the animals are eating 5.5 pounds, let's say 5 pounds a day, just to make the numbers easy, and I have 20 animals, that means they're eating about 100 pounds of grain a day. And if they're eating 100 pounds of grain a day, and the grain costs me 16 cents, right? So that means I spent whatever. I spent the 20 animals putting on 1 pound of weight. But I do have a lot of grass out here. If the 20 animals put on 1 pound of weight at 500 pounds on the average, then that extra 20 pounds makes me like $40, right? If I make $40 on it and I spent $16, then I more than doubled my money, right? And so I actually want to see the animals eat some grain. Because when the animals eat grain, I can almost be guaranteed that if they eat 1% of their body weight, they will effectively, granted that I'm utilizing the correct grain, right? Granted that I'm utilizing the correct grain, they will effectively put on 1 pound of weight for that 1% of body weight consumption. And so, I really do actually want to see my animals eat some grain, but if they're not going to eat it, I can't make them eat it. I can't make them eat it. And so, but you can tell I got a lot of grass out here, right? And I'm actually coming out here to see, they're just sleeping in the field. I got a lot of grass out here, but I have actually noticed that my animals are not eating as much grain. They are eating significantly less grain. They may only be eating about a bucket and a half a day. And that's not exactly an optimal situation. Okay, but if the animals are so full on grass, and the grass is actually, I got a few grain heads right here, right? And so the grass is starting to go to grain. And I am actually seeing that the cattle actually chew up the grain heads. And so the grain heads have a lot of energy, and and a lot of protein, and et cetera, et cetera. So they're actually walking around, and they're actually technically, I guess, eating some grain, because they are chewing up the grain heads on the field. But I got a lot of grass out here, and the animals are eating less feed. But here's the thing. Okay, so And yesterday I was actually talking about this and the whole idea of what am I looking to do, and the whole shebang, right? I was talking about this yesterday. All right, what am I doing, and what am I going to do, and because okay, and I've actually talked about this. Fake it till you make it is a joke. All right, I'm not faking it. All right, I'm not faking it. This is not fake. I don't know how else to put it to you. This is not fake. Nobody cares about an opinion. If I spoke my opinion all the time, do you think that, do you think I would get anywhere in my life? I would not, right? And I put a lot of emphasis on this. You cannot be in a situation where you have a bunch of opinions. Opinions don't mean anything. They won't get you anything. All right, I state facts. This is how much money I make. This is how I grow the grass. This is how I run my business. I state facts. If I make a small change here or there, I will tell you. All right, I just flat out tell you, right? This is a change that I made. This is the reason that I made the change. Right? I legitimately I just state facts. All right, nobody cares about an opinion. All right, you cannot be in a situation where you have a bunch of opinions. All right, if you have a bunch of opinions, nobody cares about your opinion. I fell out of heaven to 7 and my life's a magical journey. Nobody cares. All right, I started, do I lie? Right? I started this business by myself. All right, this farm did not exist until I got here. Legitimately, I started this farm. I even show you my checks. This is how much money I make. I even tell you what I do with the money. Right? I even show you how I structure my business deals. I show you everything, and I'm not lying to you about it. I don't know how else to put it. I am not lying to you about it. All right? It just is what it is. All right? I'm not telling you one thing and then maliciously leading you the wrong way and then going the other direction, and I'm not doing that. I am legitimately telling you exactly what I am doing. This is the target market weight. This is the type of animals that I buy. This is how I budget for the animals. This is how I grow my grass. This is how I run my business. Everything. Right? I legitimately tell you all of this stuff for free. And when you actually take a look at my situation, you have to understand that it is what it is. I legitimately outperformed the entire U.S. economy. More or less the whole thing. It wasn't even close. And I'm not talking about like the whole thing as an entirety. I'm talking about individual earners. I legitimately drastically outperformed practically everybody in the entire country. It was not even close. Drastically. And here's the thing. I would actually be willing to bet, right? And and I said, when I bet, because it's whatever. We can bet for and I told you so. I would bet that I actually double my income over the next 5 months. I legitimately double my income. I would actually bet, and I will bet you and I told you so. I will legitimately double my income over the next 5 months. Legitimately double. All right, and I've been talking about this, and I'm not saying, because the thing about me is that, the whole thing about me is, I'm not being malicious. All right, I'm not being malicious. I'm not, I'm not being malicious. I'm not telling you the wrong thing, and then, I'm not, I'm not some delusional, insecure moron sitting in a room, oh my God, my life's a magical journey. And if I'm not cradled like some, whatever gift to the earth, then, I'm not like that. I legitimately tell you exactly what I'm doing. I tell you exactly what I'm looking at. All right, and I'm not some malicious individual. When you take a look at it, it just is what it is. I don't know how else to put it. I'm not bragging about it. I'm legitimately just telling you the truth. I drastically outperformed practically everybody in the entire U.S. economy starting a cattle farm on my 10.5 acre field. Legitimately. Practically everybody. It wasn't even close. All right, I don't know how else to put it. It just is what it is, okay? I don't, and I'm not bragging about it. I am telling you, it is, sit there and think about it for a minute. How many people, and I've already said, you know, how many people do you know at all that's just like, you know what, you know me, I can legitimately just go and just start myself a business and start making myself $20,000 a month, and I can make these businesses whenever I feel like it. How many people do you know that can do that? Because that's what I did. And it wasn't magically easier for me. Nobody cares about an opinion, all right? If you have a bunch of opinions, nobody cares. All right, you're gonna die poor. You know, if you're poor and you're a delusional moron about it, then you'll stay poor forever. Nobody cares. You'll die poor. All right, legitimately, I don't know how else to put it. Especially not me. You know, the thing about me is that I don't save people. All right, if you're a massive pile of problems, and you know, then it's too late. All right, it's already too late. Nobody cares. Die tomorrow. Take your deal with you. Don't take anybody else down with you. All right, I'm being completely serious about it. You know, chances, okay, when you actually take a look at my situation, me, when I farm, you know, I effectively do so well that it puts me in the very top percentiles of the entire US economy. The whole thing. How many people, okay, and think about it like this. Let's just be honest with ourselves. Let's just be completely straightforward, honest about it. How many people do you know right now that's just like, you know, I could legitimately just go and start myself a business. I could start a business and I can make $20,000 a month, even that. Just that. How many people do you know that could do that? Right? I mean, list them. Write them down on a list of paper. Or, you know, list them down on a piece of paper. Write it down. How many people do you know that can do that? Because I did that. And I'm not looking to brag. I'm not looking to boast. I am telling you that it just is what it is, okay? I don't know how else to put it. It just is what it is, all right? I actually made it. You know, my life is not an opinion. I don't care about you. You know, opinions don't do anything. I don't know how else to put it. Opinions don't do anything. All right, if you legit, okay, and I talk about this like, you know, and this whole thing about opinions don't mean it. You know, you're gonna see you're gonna see this manifest in many shapes. There are a lot of people, you know, it's like you're poor and you're proud. If you're poor and you're proud, right? If you're poor and you're proud, that's not good. You're gonna die poor. All right, if you're in I fell out of heaven a 7 mode, you legitimately that's you know, you have a bunch of opinions and you're probably not worth anything. I mean, in terms of, you know, and you're probably even selling your soul to the devil for no reason. I mean, legitimately all the time. All right, probably are. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. You know, I legitimately do not know anybody that is like, you know what, you know, I made a bunch of good choices. I worked on something every day, and I legitimately, you know, did something for myself, and then I bankrupted every dollar that I touched. I have not met anybody that has done that. Not one person. And I talk about this, money is not good or bad. If you legitimately think that money's going to make you a bad person, you're an idiot. If you legitimately think that you need to be a bad person to make money, you're an idiot. All right, you know, I don't know how else to put it. You know, the thing about me is that, you know, I understand I'm not a saint. All right, I'm not a saint. I'm not a saint. You know, I don't even attempt to save people. I don't even attempt to do it. I will legitimately sit here and watch you die poor. I don't, you know, I legitimately will. Don't ask me to save you. I'm not going to save you. I don't care. All right, I give you all of my information for free. I'm not some horrible, malicious person. At the end of the day, it just is what it is. I drastically outperformed practically the entire U.S. economy by a landslide. It wasn't even close. Effectively, the whole economy. And here's the kicker. I would actually bet right now that I will be doubling my income over the next 5 months. I would bet. I would be willing to bet. I will double my income over the next 5 months. That's the big kicker. You know, I would be willing to bet. All right, and here's the thing. Okay, and I'm not asking for a pity party. You know, I'm not asking for a pity party. I'm not asking for, I don't care. You know, you could die tomorrow. I don't care. I'm not asking for a pity party. I'm just saying that, when you take a look at my situation, at least attempt to try and think about it, okay? You know, how many people do you know that can, and whatever makes sense to you. How many people do you know that grow grass like this? How many people do you know that run cattle like this? How many people do you know that legitimately make $20,000 a month on a 10.5 acre field? It's probably just me. It probably is. I legitimately graze this field at like 3 animals per acre, 24/7, 300, effectively all the time. I graze this field at like 3 animals per acre, sometimes even up to 4 or 5 animals per acre, and my grass still looks like this. All right, whatever makes sense to you, sit there and think about it. All right, just sit there and take a moment to think about it. How many people do you know that do this? Legitimately list them down on a piece of paper. How many people do you know that can grow grass like this? How many people do you know that can run cattle like this? How many people do you know that can even start a business and make $20,000 a month? Just sit there and think about it. And it wasn't magically easier for me. All right, it wasn't magically easier for me. That's all I'm saying. It was not magically easier for me. And and in terms of and I talk about all of these worthless things that when you okay, the reason that people don't the whole thing about being poor, it's like if you're poor, there are a lot of ways to know if you're legitimately poor. Are a lot of ways, and I talk about this in terms of money, right? And I talk about this in terms of a fundamental idea. When you take a look at this, what does this cost me? Answer the question. What does this cost? Right? What does this cost me? It costs me nothing. Right? You have to fundamentally understand this idea. This is one of the most important things that I can tell you about money. One of the most important things. This costs me nothing. It makes me money. You have to understand that. If you do not understand that, it's very important that you understand this. Very important. This does not cost me anything. Legitimately nothing. This makes me money. If I stopped doing this, I would hemorrhage money. My net worth would drop by millions of dollars. Legitimately. This does not cost me anything. All right, you have to understand that. That is very important. This does not cost me anything. This costs me negative money. And I put a lot of emphasis on this idea. You should not be in a situation where you're even worried. And I talk about, communication, right? And when a poor person communicates, very oftentimes when you have a poor person, right, and let's say that they're communicating about money, it doesn't matter what they're communicating about. But let's say that we're talking about money. If you legitimately put yourself in a situation where you think that you cannot do something because you don't have money, a lot of times when you listen to these people actually communicating and you actually listen to what they're saying, they are talking about $2,000 a month or less. I cannot buy or they're on some delusional fantasy. Oh my God, the world is not fair because I cannot buy $1 million house. All right, they're on some delusional fantasy. All right, it's not funny. I don't know how else to put it. It is what it is. All right, but it's very important to understand this. This does not cost me anything. All right, very important idea. This does not cost me anything. This makes me money. This costs negative money. If I here's the thing. My expenses for the last 2 months have been about $1,200 a month, okay? They've been about $1,200 a month, about $1,500 a month, about $1,400 a month, something like that. And the reason that my expenses were so high was because I was actually fertilizing my new lease property. This month, I will spend $0. I would legitimately anticipate that I spend $0 on my business over the next 4 weeks. Legitimately $0. So if you average it all together, how much do I spend on my business a month? How much do I spend? $1,200, $1,400, and then $0 added up. $1,400, whatever. $1,400. Let's just say whatever. Let's just say $1,400 for both the months, because I did buy antibiotics, right? I did buy antibiotics, and that cost me about $300. So let's just say $3,000. So it cost me $3,000 to run my business for 3 months. How much money did it cost me per month? Legit, honest to God, honest to God, I don't know how else to put it. It is what it is. It's not an opinion. I told you exactly what I was buying. I bought fertilizer and I bought some antibiotics. I even told you exactly what fertilizer I was buying and how much I was paying for it. And I didn't lie about it. I told you the truth. God is my witness. I told you the truth. This is exactly, more or less, within like a 3% margin of error. I don't, the cents maybe I did not tell you, but I told you how much I paid. All right, I pay about somewhere around $600 and $650 a ton, and I bought and I buy about 2 tons. I bought about 2 tons 2 times, okay, and then I bought some antibiotics, and I bought some vaccinations too. So let's just say $1,500 a month. $1,500 a month is what I spent on my business. And over the next 4 weeks, I legitimately anticipate that I will spend $0. Zero. And I even showed you my checks. Right? How much money did I make off of that $3,000? About in terms of just straight money, about $28,000. But realistically, I did not sell all of my animals, right? I did not sell all my animals. I still have my herd, and and that has a monetary value to it, right? I mean, these animals, they're going up in value. I take very good care of them. They're going up in value, and when I reasonably take a look at it, I'm not just going on some delusional fantasy. When I legitimately take a look at it, I would anticipate that the appreciation value is probably over 12,000. It probably is. So when I put it all together, how much money did I make? About $40,000, and it cost me how much? About $3,000. All right, legitimately, that it is what it is. All right, I don't know how else to put it. It just is what it is. All right, and I've even spoken to you about, I even spoke to you about this yesterday, about where do I see my business going, right? Where do I see my business going? What am I doing with the money? What am I looking at? What do I have going on? I even a couple of days ago, I even wrote it down on a piece of paper. Right? I even wrote it down on a piece of paper and I showed it to you. And then, yesterday I even spoke about, the small change that I am making. All right, and it's like, if you don't understand money, if you understand cattle, then we can talk about it in terms of cattle. How many animals did I say I am going to liquidate next month? And what do I believe the average weight is going to be? And what will I do with the money? I told you everything. And also, when am I going to get paid again? Right, I told you all of this yesterday. Right, and I will anticipate that I will sell about 18 animals over the next 4 weeks. 18 animals, okay? 18 animals. And how much do I think they're gonna weigh? How much do I reasonably anticipate that they will weigh? About 650, 700. What am I going to do with the money? Well, when I sell the 18 animals, I will probably make enough money to buy about 32 animals, and I will have enough money to buy fertilizer and a load of grain, and I will still probably buy even if I need medication, and I will still probably have $1,500, $2,000 left over. I probably will. That's what I'm going to do with the money. I'm effectively going to grow my business, and I would anticipate that I get paid again in 2 months after that. All right, I will get paid again 2 months after that, and I will effectively get, okay. And I would legitimately bet that I double my income over the next 5 months. Double my income. All right, and and I'm not asking for a pity party. I'm not asking for anything, but whatever. I don't care. You could die tomorrow. I don't care. All right, I don't know how else to put it. But at least at least understand that this was not easy for me. This was not some easy magical adventure for me. I did not just magically wake up one day and do this. It was not magically easier for me. Just understand that, at least, please. All right, it was not magically easier for me. All right, I legitimately have some of the best results in the world. Legitimately some of the best. When you take a look at what I'm doing, This legitimately may put me, in terms of the U.S. economy, there are many ways that you can take a look at it. There are many ways that you can take a look at it. It doesn't matter whichever way that you cut the pie, it's still a whole pie. All right, whichever way you want to look at, I legitimately have some of the best results in the world. Legitimately, some of the best results in the world. By a long shot. And if you want to take a look at it in terms of money, then take a look at it in terms of money. If you want to take a look at it in terms of the grass and the cattle and whatever, then take a look at it in terms of whatever it makes sense to you. Whatever makes sense to you, take a look at it through that. But just understand, at least give me, just at least give me the I don't know what you would call it, but at least just understand that when you are looking at me, just understand that it was not easy for me either. It was not. This was borderline. I don't know how else to put it. This took me like 15 years. All right, this was not easier for me. Nobody cares about your opinion. All right, I don't know how else to put it, but just at least understand that. All right, don't look at people like me and go, this is unfair. He makes 400 times more money than the average person. That's unfair. Don't do that. All right, because all that's going to do is make me upset. All right, because I legitimately worked my tail off to do this. And it wasn't just some magical adventure for me either. It was not some magical Disneyland journey for me. Just at least understand that. All right, I legitimately have some of the best results in the world known to mankind. All right, and it was not magically easier for me. That just give me that. All right, nobody cares about your opinion. I don't save people. I legitimately, I don't save people. All right, because here, okay, if we were going to go into more of like a personal perspective, and I've already shown, I even show you, how much, I even show you how how much I make and everything, right? And let's just say 10% of my money. And here's the thing, I would be willing to bet that I actually double my income over the next 5 months. I double my income. So let's take a look at it for what it is. I may even more than double my income. And right now, and I've already shown you that right now I make about $20,000 a month running the cattle business, right? I make about $20,000 a month. Maybe a little bit more, maybe about 22,000, something like that. And so let's take a look at it. How many, and this is it's whatever, right? I mean, and I'm just gonna tell you because it is what it is. I'm not being malicious. I'm just telling you the truth. How many people do you know? How many that would legitimately sell their soul for even 10% of the money? For even 10%, let's say $350,000 a year. How many people do you know that will legitimately sell their soul to have, to gain that much money, right? And let's just say it's whatever, let's just say whatever, $5,000 a month. Let's just say 5,000, right? Because, I would reasonably anticipate that I double my income over the next, more than double. I may even more than double my income over the next 5 months. How many people do you know right now that will legitimately sell their soul for $5,000, a worthless amount of money, $5,000 a month? How many people? Practically everybody. Nobody's going to wake up tomorrow and go, my God, here's like the greatest farmer known to man. Legitimately has some of the best results that mankind has ever seen. Giving away his information for free. Maybe I should spend the next 15 hours a day working for 15 years to learn how to do this too. Practically nobody's going to do that. And I'm not being a clown about it. I'm legitimately telling you the truth. I legitimately live where I work, and I work on this thing 7 days a week. I did not just magically wake up one day and start doing this. And I've already told you that there is no skipping the work. Nobody cares about your opinion. If you legitimately are walking around and I fell out of heaven a 7-lane, nobody cares. What's actually going to happen is you're just going to end up dying poor. All right, I did not just magically start doing this one day. All right, and there is no skipping the work. And how many people do you know it's like instantaneously willing to sell their soul for nothing? For some minuscule amount of money, let's just say $5,000 a month, a worthless amount of money, and they're immediately going to sell their soul. Chances are they're not, chances are it's like once you've become that, once you've legitimately become poor, you're probably going to die poor. All right, I don't know how else to put it. Chances are you're not going to wake up tomorrow and go, here's a guy who legitimately does like the best in the world. Legitimately one of the best in the world, if not like near the very best. He is giving his information away for free. He legitimately shows me exactly how he does it. And, and if I work on this, and if I legitimately just set myself to go and work on this thing for 15 hours a day for the next 15 years of my life, I can make it too. Oh, maybe I should just focus on getting to the 10% mark, because if I get to the 10% mark, I can practice for free. Chances are you're not going to do that. All right, I don't know how else to put it. Chances are you're not. And I've already put a lot of emphasis on this idea. If you get to the 10% mark, you can actually practice for free, and that is like one of the most practical things that I can possibly tell you. You can practice for free if you get to the 10% mark. If you get to the 10% mark, you should be making about $2,000 to $2,500 a month on a 10.5 acre field. That is how much money you should be making to be at the 10% mark. And if you get to the 10% mark, you can practice for free. I don't save people. I'm not a slave. I don't work for free. All right, and I know that this sounds horrible, but effectively nobody's going to offer me anything. I will effectively nobody. And I know that sounds horrible. But if I legitimately felt like I needed more money, which I don't think about, I talk about this all the time. Money is kind of like this, you have to understand. All right, like when you take a look at my perspective, and I've already said this multiple times. I say this all the time. I'm not a saint. But you know what? I'm also not a gambler. I also don't have some massive spending problem. I'm also not some delusional moron. All right, I'm also, and I'm also not a saint. I mean, but when you take a look at me, I effectively net positive about $10,000 to $15,000 a month, and I still drive the same car. I still live in my double wide. Let's just say it is what it is, right? It is what it is. All right, I don't know how else to put it, because if I was driving a Lamborghini, I mean, you would know. All right, legitimately, okay, I'm not lying about it. And what am I doing with the money? I'm growing my business, right? I'm legitimately growing my business. That's what I'm doing with the money. Am I going around buying myself a Lamborghini and doing drugs and no, I'm not. What am I doing, right? I'm growing my business. Right? And that's the thing about my because fake it till you make it is a joke. All right, a bunch of opinions and nothing to show for it is a joke. All right, I'm not making this up. I don't know how else to put it. I'm not making this up. All right, I don't make this up. I'm not some malicious person. I'm not telling you something and then just pushing you in the wrong direction on purpose. I'm not doing anything like that. I'm legitimately giving you my information for free. And if you want to think about it in terms of a relative metric, how many people do you know right now that are just legitimately in a situation that they're like, you know what, I can start myself a business and I can make myself $20,000 a month. How many people do you know that can do just that? I can go and start myself a business whenever I feel like it, and I will make myself $20,000 a month. How many people do you know that can even do that? Ask yourself that. Right, and I'm not, I'm not asking for a pity party. I'm not asking for, I'm not asking, I don't even care if you die tomorrow. I don't. All right, if every single last, I don't. All right, I don't save people. It's not funny, and I'm being completely serious about it. Just at least, just give me the, I guess the best word would be the understanding. Just give me that. Just understand, at least put in some effort to at least understand that, this was not magically easier for me. I legitimately have some of the best results, known to mankind, known to all of mankind. I legitimately do. If you find someone who can do better than me, then let me see them. Legitimately, let me see it. All right, if you can legitimately find somebody that does better than me, then let me see it. I have not seen anybody even do 10% in my entire life, honest to God. All right, I don't know how else to put it. Just give me the understanding. This, it was not magically easier for me, and I legitimately have some of the best results known to all of mankind. Legitimately. And it was not some magical journey for me either. It was not some Disneyland adventure for me. This was borderline impossible. And I'm not going to say it was borderline impossible, because then it's like, you know, I feel like it's putting me in bad graces with God. It was very difficult. Okay. What I am going to say is that you know, this was not magically easier for me. It legitimately took me 15 years. Legitimately took me 15 years. All right, and it's like, you know, and now when I take a look at everything, you know, I'm very much on the up and up. I'm doing very well for myself, and I would even anticipate that I double my income over the next 5 months, maybe even more. You know, and when you take a look at my results, I legitimately have some of the best results known to all of mankind. And, you know, and it's like, you know, and it's like, you know, and, you know, I don't know how else to put it other than to just, you know, it just is what it is. You know, I'm not going to go and be poor, you know, I don't know how else to put it. All right, it just is what it is. All right, you know, this is not fake. All right, I don't know how else to put it. This is not fake. You know, it just is what it is. You know, I mean, you know, I'm not being some horrible malicious person about it. All right, I'm not being some horrible malicious person about it. I'm telling you the truth. I effectively outperformed the entire U.S. economy by a landslide. It wasn't even close. Legitimately, the whole thing. I'm not talking about the whole thing as a whole, but effectively every individual in the entire country I outperformed practically, and it wasn't even close. Was not even close. And in whichever way you want to cut the pie whichever way you want. Cut the pie whichever way you want. How many people do you know right now that it's just like, you know what, I can go and start myself a business and just start making myself $20,000 a month, and you know what, I will actually probably even double the size of my business over the next 5 months? How many people do you know that even does that? Think about it and write them down on a piece of paper. All right, you know, I don't know how else to put it other than it is what it is. All right, it is what it is. You know, nobody cares about an opinion. And I've already said, you know, chances are if you're poor, you're going to die poor. There's no reason for you to die poor. And when you take a look at a situation like me, there is no reason why, you know, like if you are legitimately looking to become a farmer, there is no reason why you cannot do 10%. No reason. You're not so dumb that you cannot do 10%. You're not so whatever that you cannot do 10%. You can do 10%. Everybody can. Effectively everybody. All right, if you legitimately want to become a farmer, then you can do 10%. And if you get to the 10% mark, you can actually practice for free. Understand that. The fertilizer will pay for itself. The cattle will pay for themselves. The business, you know, you can go and start yourself a business. It'll just cost you a couple $100s to get the licensing. Everything will pay for itself. You have to fundamentally understand this idea. It is very important. And when you take a look at my expenses, when you take a look at what I am doing, how much did it cost me and how much money did I make? I even answered the question for you, right? And I'm not lying about it. I am telling you the truth. I even told you what I bought with the money. Right, I bought 3 tons of fertilizer. I bought 4 tons of fertilizer. How much did that 4 tons of fertilizer cost me? About $625 a ton. Right, you know, and I bought antibiotics. How much did those antibiotics cost me? About $375. Right, I bought an intranasal vaccination and a subcutaneous modified live one shot of vaccination, and I bought a blackleg vaccination. How much did that cost me? About $200. So add it all up. How much is that? It's about $3,000, more or less. You know, my plus or minus maybe 3 to 5%. It's 97% accurate, at least. So it cost me $3,000, and I legitimately anticipate that my business will cost me $0 over the next 30 days. Legitimately zero. I already have everything that I need. I have all of this grass, etc., etc. So when you average it all out, how much does my business cost me? And I've already told you, you know, and I've actually already said this, you know, and I even said this in another video. You know, my business costs me about $1,200 a month right now. It costs about $1,200 a month. So it cost me $1,200. And I even showed you my checks and showed you how much money I make. How much money do I make? Cash, not even the equity evaluation of my herd, just in terms of cash, how much money do I make? Right, about 20 in those 3 months. Okay, here's the thing. If we're actually going to span it out to 3 months, you also need to understand that next month, the beginning of next month, I will actually end up selling 18 animals. But if you do that, I mean, the amount of revenue that I generate goes vertical. And I don't know how else to put it. Okay, but let's not, let's think about it in two separate equations. So over the last 2 months, my business cost me how much? Right, about $3,000. Right, it cost me $3,000. And how much money did I make? About $28,000. Right, and I didn't even sell all my animals. So if my business costs me $3,000 and it makes me $28,000, I just take the $3,000 out of the $28,000 that I make. That simple. Legitimately, it is that there is no nothing. All right, it is what it is. And here's the thing. Now let's talk about the next month. I actually anticipate that my expenses will be $0. My expenses will be $0. And let's not talk about it in terms of money. Let's talk about it in terms of assets. What am I going to do with the money? Because if I legitimately felt like I needed more cash, I can always just go and get it. The cash is not an incredibly great asset. It's an important asset, but it's not like having some some high quality dividend returning stock or whatever, an asset. You're better off with a good investment. So let's talk about the next month. I legitimately anticipate that my expenses will be $0. Zero. Legitimately, I'm not lying about it. I'm telling you the truth. My expenses will be $0, and I will sell 18 animals. So let's talk about it in terms of assets. What will I do when I liquidate these 18 animals? The 18 animals will hit the scale at about $650, $700. So what will I do with the money? Well, with the 18 animals that I sell, I will probably, what I will more than likely do is end up buying about 32 cattle, a load of grain, a load of fertilizer, and I will still probably have, $2,000 left over. And here's the thing. Over the next 2 months, I can actually do that again. The rest of the 17 animals will go to the market again. And when that happens, I will effectively more or less make roughly the same amount of money. Maybe, plus or minus, maybe subtract a 5 or 10%. Because the animals will be a little bit lighter. I can, and when I take a look at my situation, I effectively anticipate that I will double my income. Legitimately double my income over the next 3 to 5 months. Legitimately. All right, I'm not lying about it. I'm legitimately telling you the truth. And let's say I go out and I buy myself a big old piece of land, right? I go and buy myself a 100 acre land or whatever, right? I go and buy myself a piece of land. And let's say that, for me to take, and I've already said, I'm going to float about, probably about $250,000 worth of that land by just taking leverage against this property and the cash flow in the property, right? I've already discussed this idea. So if I go and I take a loan for $750 and I've already cash flowed $250,000 of it, that $750,000 loan is going to cost me like whatever, right? I mean, like $3,500 a month. All right, the $3,000, okay, and the $3,500 a month, I will just take that out of my business. I don't care about the cost of the land. What matters to me is that my business grows. I don't care about the cost of an asset. Granted that it's not some, ridiculous, like a out of budget type thing. $1 million, I don't care about $1 million. All right, if the land costs $1 million, I don't care about $1 million. $1 million is actually borderline too little amount of money for me to even care when it comes to real estate. I probably won't do a deal for $1 million because $1 million is too small. Legitimate. I'm not bragging about it. I'm telling you the truth. $1 million is too little money. That's why I won't do it. I'm just being honest about it. I'm not bragging about it. I'm just telling you the truth. $1 million is too little. All right, I'll probably end up doing something closer to 2 or 4 million. All right, that's the big idea. All right, and when, and I don't know how else to put it, but, it is what it is, okay? And what, the biggest understanding is, how much does this cost me? You cannot be in a situation, okay, because a lot of times when you find out that, when you legitimately, have a poor person, when you legitimately have a poor person, and that poor person is communicating about money, and you actually listen to what they're saying, they're almost always complaining about something about $2,000 a month. If they made an extra $2,000 a month, all of their problems would be solved. Legitimately, all of them. With like 98% of people, 93% of people, $2,000 a month would solve their problem. And that, you do not want to end up in a situation where that becomes your life. There is no benefit to being poor. You do not want to be in a situation where that becomes your life. All right, how about, we go and read a book? How about we go and learn something, right? How about we go and actually, get over ourselves and actually start going and putting in some effort? All right, there are a lot of things that can be done. All right, I fell out of heaven to seven, and my life's a magical journey, and everything's falling apart because I don't have $2,000 a month. Is not exactly, don't turn into that. All right, you don't want to turn into that. How about you turn into, I'm not going to say turn into, but just consider it for what it is. I'm not giving advice to any. I don't care. You could die tomorrow. I don't care. How about we go and read a book? Right, go and read a good book. How about we go and we look for good information? How about we look to objectively improve ourselves? All right, how about we there are a lot of things that you can do. I fell out of heaven to seven. My life's a magical journey, and if everything doesn't work out for me in some spectacular fashion, then everything's unfair, and I sold my soul to the devil for nothing. And all I have to do is throw a Hail Mary into the middle of nowhere. It's not gonna work. Forever, it will not work. Forever. All right, delusional fantasy and all sorts of massive pile of problems. The thing about me is, I've already said this. I've said this multiple times. I'm not a saint. Right? I'm also not a thief. I'm also, I don't know how else to put it. It just is what my results are. The results. I'm not making this up. My grass is not fake. My cattle are not fake. My checks are not fake. Right? I don't know how else to put it. And I tell you the truth. All right, if you don't understand money, because I've already said that over the last, since the last about 2 months, my business cost me about $3,000, and I made about $28,000 back. And if you don't understand money, let's talk about it in terms of cattle and in the future. I would reasonably anticipate that I sell 18 animals over the next month at 650 to 700 pounds, and the majority of them will be 1 to 1.5 type medium large frame. So these animals, when I sell these animals, I reasonably anticipate that by liquidating these 18 animals, I will make enough money to buy about 32 animals, to buy about 32 animals. I will be able to buy a load of grain, fertilizer, and antibiotics if I need them, and I will still probably have about $2,000 left over. So I will effectively that's what I reasonably anticipate. I will sell 18 animals. I will buy 32 animals. I will buy a load of grain. I will buy a load of fertilizer, and I will buy medication, and I will still probably have $2,000 left over. And in 2 months, I will actually be ready to do that again. When I take a look at it for what it is, I would actually bet. That I actually double my income over the next 5 months. Double my income. If you thought that I made a lot of money, you are about to crap your pants. All right, because the thing about me is that what am I going to do with the Lamborghini? All right, and I'm just, okay, in terms of money, I'm just going to be completely honest to you about it. $1 million worth of real estate is actually too little money for me to even care about. Borderline. It is borderline too little. That's effectively where my finances are right now, legitimately, and I'm not lying about it. I'm being completely honest about it. $1 million is actually kind of $1 million is actually too little. All right, legitimately, I'm telling you the truth. All right, $1 million is, I don't know how else to tell you. It just is. I'm not lying to you about it. $1 million is borderline too little money for me to even care. Legitimately, I'm being completely honest about it. I'm really actually looking to do something about 2 to 4 million. My business is doing very well. And here's the thing, and just understand that this was, because, well, I don't care. You could die tomorrow. I don't care. Trust me, I don't. You don't like it, you can talk to my lawyer. All right, legitimately, I don't know how else to put it. I don't know how else to put it. All right, but if you're gonna, at least give me the understanding. At least understand that this was not easier for me. All right, it was not easier for me. And I legitimately show you, and when you're, I effectively have like some of the best, if not like borderline in the top results of the entire planet. The entire planet. I don't know how else to put it. I legitimately do so well at farming that, that it's borderline, like it put me in the very top percentiles of the entire US economy. The whole thing. At least give me that, because it is what it is. And if you don't want to believe it, then at least, keep it to yourself, because you're an idiot. I'm legitimately telling you the truth. How many people do you know right now that's like, I just started myself a business and started making $20,000 a month. How many people do you know that even do that? Because I legitimately did it is not an opinion from me. It's not an opinion. I'm telling you the truth. I legitimately did it. You're looking at it. I show you my checks. I show you what my grass looks like. I show you what my cattle look like. I legitimately show it to you. I show it to you. How many people do you know? It's like, I legitimately started myself a business. I make $20,000 a month. And in all honesty, within 5 months, I will probably even more than double my income. How many people do you know that do that? Write them down on a piece of paper. Write them down on a piece of paper. All right, and that's what it took for me to get into the very top percentiles of the entire US economy. That's what it took. So understand that, at least give me that. It wasn't magically easier for me. And at the end of the day, I legit, if you're going to, and my whole thing is like, if you're poor, you're probably going to die poor. There's nothing that I can do about it. I don't, especially, and I'm not going to care. I mean, what, do I want to see you die poor? No, I don't. Is it probably going to happen? Probably. All right, once it's happened, it's practically permanent. You will effectively hold on to being poor for the rest of your life. I guarantee it. Chances are you're not sitting there going, oh my God, now that I found this guy and he is legitimately like the best farmer that the world has ever known. Legitimately does like nobody, this is ridiculously good. And he's giving his information away for free. And, chances are you're not doing that. All right, maybe I should actually start, attempting to do something for myself. And maybe I should go out and actually attempt to do something for myself. Chances are you're not doing that. Chances are you're just poor and you're going to be poor forever. All right, I don't know how else to put it. Me, when I go and I read a book, and let's say I read a scientific paper, let's say I read a published paper, and it's some guy sitting in a lab, and he's created some agar solution out of seaweed extract, and he's infused this agar solution with minerals. And he takes this agar solution that is infused with minerals and plants a seed in it, and then takes leaf material from that plant and does a chemical analysis of it, then figures out what kind of minerals are the plant metabolizing. I'm not sitting there going, right? I'm taking a look at it and I'm going, this is incredible stuff, right? Here is a person who actually knows what they're doing, and and I should really, really focus on reading this paper. All right, I mean, I don't know how else to put it, right? I mean, go and read a book. Get over yourself. You're gonna die poor, or you're gonna die poor. All right, go read a book, go and practice. Go and find good information. Go and do something for yourself. Don't be an I fell out of heaven at 7 and my life's a magical journey land forever. Nobody cares about your opinion. Or I'm not gonna be the one who cares. Trust me, I won't care. All right, I will legitimately watch you die poor. It's not up to me to save people. I don't save people, all right? I legitimately don't. And, that's it for me today, YouTube. Y'all have a good one.